Dracula's Daughter was a black and white 1936 monster movie from the Universal catalog. And this is definitely one of the more interesting entries in this series of films. So Dracula's Daughter, the title character, is played here by actress Gloria Holden, who sort of reminds me of a blend of Gloria Swanson and from Sunset Boulevard and Morticia Addams. Kind of an interesting character, this dark, broody, Eastern European character. The character's name is Countess Zaleska in this film. She's got this eerie presence to her. And, the curious thing about this film is you don't really know for sure if she is actually Dracula's biological daughter, or perhaps she's just one of his followers who was bitten at some point. I don't think the film was ever very clear about that. In fact, as best as I can recollect, I don't think you actually ever see her with fangs either. I may have missed it, but I don't remember that when I watched this. In the Universal Monster catalog, she is probably one of the least memorable because, to be honest, she doesn't really have a supernatural, monstrous quality to her. You've got films like Frankenstein, Dracula, The Bride of Frankenstein, The Wolfman. But with her, we see that she's just this character who is all concealed in black, and she's just this curious presence through the film, not necessarily scary, but I don't know, maybe more disturbed, like she hates the nature of what she is, whatever that actually is. Is she a monster? Is she a descendant of Dracula? Well, who really knows? But on to the plot. The film picks up literally at the end of where the original Dracula movie ended. This is the one with Bela Lugosi, so the film starts. He's dead. He's laying there on the ground. And we see Edward Van Sloan again. He's playing the Professor Van Helsing, who has just killed him. And I will admit I loved seeing Edward Van Sloan return again to this role. And he's just as creepy and just analytical as before. He's kind of like the 1930s equivalent of a Fox Mulder. He's cold and logical about his actions that he just took literally in just killing the vampire. He doesn't deny it when the investigators from Scotland Yard show up. He says, yeah, I killed a vampire. So he gets carted off to Scotland Yard, but instead of hiring a lawyer for his defense, he recruits the help of a psychiatrist, a character, Dr. Jeffrey Garth, who is played here by Otto Kruger. So the Countess, meanwhile, is going about, and one of her first actions is to use a hypnotizing ring to mesmerize a police officer at the jail so that she can sneak away with Dracula's body. So she does this because she's trying to go through some rituals to purge her from this vampire condition. So along with her manservant, this big character named Sandor, who was played by this actor Irving Pitchell, he's this tall, creepy guy with very well-parted hair. So she goes through this ritual of obtaining the body and burning it, hoping to be free of this curse of Dracula, but it doesn't work. So a little later into the film, she encounters this Dr. Garth character and explains to him the struggles that she's going through, and he assures her that using modern science and psychology and whatnot, that she can overcome her dark urges. Well, we the viewer know better, of course. So anyhow, moving on, Countess Zaleska, she sends out her servant Sandor to find a young girl to bring back to her under this pretense that she's going to model for her painting, but in actuality, she plans to kill her. So this young girl shows up at her place, a generally creepy scene, and, well, she's a goner. But the girl does survive somehow, and Dr. Garth finds the girl and uses some hypnosis and science to try to figure out what happened. And he gets some of the clues right before the girl dies. So the Countess kind of gives up the whole fight of the vampire stuff and decides to leave. But before she leaves for Transylvania, she takes away Dr. Garth's secretary, who's this character, Janet Blake, who's played by Marguerite Churchill. And just kind of a side note, I guess that was one of the subplots about how Dr. Garth and Janet have sort of this unusual antagonistic relationship where they care for each other but they bicker with one another. There's sort of an implied romance there. I never really got into the chemistry of this relationship at all. I mean, there would be silly scenes where, Dr. Garth needs to tie his necktie and he can't do it, and his maid can't do it, but of course, Janet steps up and ties it for him. And the film, doesn't really reveal that he cares for Janet until it gets to the point that he's kidnapped, and then off he goes to Transylvania as well. So the Countess arrives back in Transylvania, and of course, wouldn't you know it, there's a big Bavarian party going on with the music and the dinner, because that seems to happen all the time in Transylvania. But the locals see, oh no, there's a light over at the Dracula place, and yeah, there's the big chase. Dracula's daughter's running through the castle, and she has this Janet character kidnapped there. And, thinking about it, boy, they made really short time making this trip from London to Transylvania, but geography is not my strong suit. Maybe they're not that far apart geographically. I don't know. But they do finally catch up. The Countess has Janet as the bait, and Dr. Garth shows up. And I'll let you kind of watch from here. This is sort of the big conclusion of the film. What happens to the Countess? What happens to her creepy servant, Sandor? Does Dr. Garth rescue Janet? Well, watch the movie and judge for yourself. So, in summary, Dracula's Daughter was interesting, but it didn't really have the flair or the over-the-top cheesiness of some of the other Universal monster movies. The Countess is just a stern, serious, shadowy woman who's struggling with this mysterious affliction, and there just wasn't enough here to really get invested into this character. And I found I was really wishing for something like Bela Lugosi to show up in a cameo, but that never happened. Anything to kind of help this feel more like a Universal film. But, if anything, the film was noteworthy to see Edward Van Sloan reprise his role as Van Helsing. And that did really add to the value of this film, and he does a perfect job. It's like he just stepped right back in as a continuation of his character from Dracula before. So, in researching this, I found there was an amusing sub-story about this, is that the actor William Holden, who was one of my favorite actors, originally when he started off and getting into Hollywood, and he was kind of in the early days, his original name was Bill Beadle. And since Hollywood usually gives more impressive names to actors, the story here is that there was an assistant director named Harold Winston who was divorced from actress Gloria Holden from this film. And he still cared for her, and in honor of her, he renamed this actor, Bill Beadle, as William Holden, in honor of his former spouse. So I thought that was pretty cool. I've watched a bunch of William Holden films on my channel, and I liked that particular connection. So that's Dracula's Daughter. It's one of the Universal monster movies, probably not one that's remembered by many people. It has some merits to it, but probably not one of the best of the series. Still, it's worth checking out if you want the continuity of seeing all of the Universal monster movies and seeing this one little segment of the story of Dracula kind of continuing in with his daughter. Or is it his daughter? Can't really tell. So check it out.
But surely you can't expect to face an English jury with such a defense.
It's my only one, because it's true.